"Get your hands off me." I said, "Get your hands off me." Nobody moved. 8 people standing in that hotel lobby, and not one of them said a word. That's where this story starts. Not with the acquisition. Not with the press release. Not with the moment Darnell Osei-Kumah walked back into the Albrecht Grand Hotel as its legal owner. It starts on a Tuesday evening in October, when a security guard named Phil Sutter grabbed a 53-year-old black man by the collar and dragged him across a marble floor like he was hauling garbage to the curb. And if you think you already know how this story ends, stay with me, because you don't know the half of it. If you're new here, welcome to Lineage Tales. Hit that subscribe button and stick around, because we don't do surface-level stories on this channel. We go all the way down. Darnell Osei-Kumah had flown into Cincinnati that afternoon on a delayed flight from Atlanta. He was tired. His briefcase was heavy. He'd been wearing the same charcoal blazer since 6 in the morning, and somewhere over Tennessee, he'd spilled coffee on his left sleeve. By the time his car dropped him at the corner of 5th and Vine, he looked like a man who'd had a long day, which he had. He pushed through the revolving door of the Albrecht Grand and walked toward the front desk. The Albrecht was one of those old hotels that still believed in chandeliers, the size of small cars in marble that cost more per square foot than most people's rent. It was beautiful, and it knew it. The staff knew it too. The woman at the front desk, her name tag said Christine, looked up from her computer screen, then looked back down. Darnell waited. She kept typing. "Excuse me," he said. Christine glanced up again. Her eyes moved from his face to his jacket sleeve, lingered on the coffee stain, then returned to her screen. "One moment," she said. Not an apology. A dismissal. Darnell set his briefcase down. He was a patient man. People who knew him said that was one of his most defining qualities, that stillness he carried. But even patient men notice when they're being made to wait for no reason. 3 minutes passed. 4. A white couple in their 60s approached the desk from the other side. Christine looked up immediately, smiled immediately. "Good evening, welcome to the Albrecht. How can I help you?" Darnell watched that happen and said nothing. He'd watched that happen 1,000 times in his life. He picked up his briefcase and waited. When Christine finally turned back to him, her expression had reset to something closer to neutral. "Can I help you?" "I have a reservation. Osei-Kumah." She typed it in, frowned at her screen. Typed something else. "I'm not seeing anything under that name. Try the company name, Kumah Capital." Another frown. "I don't." "Sir, are you sure you have the right hotel?" "I'm sure, because we're quite. The Albrecht is a full-service luxury." "I know what the Albrecht is," Darnell said quietly. "I'd like to speak to your manager." That's when Phil Sutter appeared. Phil Sutter was the kind of security guard who had decided, somewhere along the way, that his job title was interchangeable with the word authority. He was thick through the shoulders, mid-40s, with the look of a man who had been told he was intimidating, often enough that he'd started to believe it was a professional qualification. He came around the side of the desk and positioned himself between Darnell and the front counter. Physical. Deliberate. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Darnell said. "The front desk is having trouble locating my reservation." "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. I'm standing at the front desk. You're crowding the counter and making our guests uncomfortable." Sutter's eyes flicked sideways toward the older couple, who were watching now, curious. "I'm going to ask you one more time to step back. I'm a guest here. I'm checking in. I don't have any record of that. You're not the one who keeps the records." Something shifted in Sutter's face. It was fast, just a fraction of a second. But Darnell saw it. He'd been seeing that look his whole life, too. It was the look that came right before a man decided he didn't need a reason anymore. "Sir, I need you to leave the premises." "I'm not leaving." "Sir, I have a reservation at this hotel. I'd like to speak to the general manager." Sutter grabbed him, not a hand on the shoulder, not a firm escort toward the door. He grabbed Darnell by the back of the collar and the arm and physically yanked him sideways. And Darnell, a 53-year-old man who was not expecting to be physically seized in the lobby of a hotel, stumbled and went down hard on one knee on the marble floor. The briefcase hit the ground. Papers scattered. And in the silence that followed, nobody moved. Nobody said a word. The couple at the desk looked away. Christine was staring at her computer screen. A bellhop near the elevator doors had suddenly found something very interesting to look at on his cart. Sutter stood over Darnell and said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "You come back in here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Darnell picked up his briefcase. He picked up his papers. He straightened his jacket. He stood up. And he looked at Phil Sutter with an expression that Sutter would later describe, in a deposition, as unutterable. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He just looked at him and then he walked out. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand who Darnell Osei-Kumah was. Because this is the part that matters. Darnell was born in 1971 in Columbus, Ohio, third child of a Ghanaian immigrant father who worked 2 jobs for 11 years before opening a dry cleaning business on the east side. His mother taught elementary school. They were not wealthy. They were not connected. What they had was a house that was always clean, a kitchen that always had something on the stove, and a father who said the same thing to his children every single morning before school. You are more than what anyone expects of you. Act like it. Darnell had been acting like it his entire life. He graduated from Ohio State with a degree in finance. Went to work for a mid-size investment firm in Cleveland. Spent 12 years learning everything there was to know about capital markets, asset valuation, and the particular art of identifying undervalued properties before anyone else did. Then, in 2007, the year before everything fell apart, he left, took the money he'd saved, borrowed the rest, and started Kumah Capital. The timing looked insane. His colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. His own brother called him and asked if he was okay. But Darnell had done the math, and Darnell trusted his math. Kumah Capital survived 2008 when firms twice its size didn't. By 2015, it was managing over $400 million in assets. By 2023, that number was closer to $2 billion. Darnell Osei-Kumah was not a man who needed to prove himself to a security guard in a hotel lobby. But on that Tuesday night in October, Phil Sutter didn't know any of that. And the people standing in that lobby didn't know any of that. They just saw a black man in a stained jacket get thrown out of a nice hotel. And they let it happen. Darnell did not go back that night. He went to a different hotel, checked in without incident, ordered room service, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to his attorney, a woman named Adeora Mensah Cole, who had represented Kumah Capital for 9 years, and who, when she heard what had happened, said nothing for 4 full seconds before asking, "Did anyone get it on camera?" The second call was to his CFO, a man named Russell Tate, who told him to sleep on it before making any decisions. The third call was to nobody anyone expected. See, here's the piece of the story that hadn't come out yet. The piece that changes everything. 3 months earlier, Darnell had been approached by a private equity group that was quietly looking to offload a hospitality portfolio. 12 properties across 6 states. The flagship of that portfolio was a landmark hotel in Cincinnati, one that had been hemorrhaging money for 4 consecutive years, that had deferred maintenance on everything from the HVAC to the elevator systems, and that was now sitting on the books at a valuation its owners desperately wanted someone to take off their hands. The Albrecht Grand. Darnell had been in final negotiations for 6 weeks. The deal was structured, the financing was in place, and the closing was scheduled for 9 days away. He had come to Cincinnati that Tuesday to do one final walkthrough of the property. Quietly, without announcing himself, exactly as he always did before signing. He believed in seeing a thing with your own eyes before you put your name on it. He believed in knowing what you were getting. And now he knew. The next morning, Darnell met with Adeora at a coffee shop 6 blocks from the Albrecht. She had a legal pad in front of her and a look on her face that he recognized. Focused, deliberate, already 3 steps ahead. "Walk me through it again," she said. "Everything." He did. When he finished, she tapped her pen against the pad twice. "The lobby has cameras. Full coverage. It's a liability requirement for properties that size. If the footage is preserved, we have the incident documented. They'll say I was trespassing." "Were you?" Darnell looked at her. "I had a reservation under a holding company. Kumah Capital Hotels LLC. The desk couldn't find it. That's a clerical issue. not a trespass. Adaora nodded slowly. And the acquisition closes in 9 days. She was quiet for a moment. Then Darnell, you could pull out, I know. You have exit windows. The deal's not done. You could walk away from the hotel entirely, file a complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, take this public, and never have to set foot in that building again. I know. That's one option. He picked up his coffee. What's the other option? She looked at him steadily. You close the deal, on schedule, and you walk back in there as the owner. The coffee shop was quiet for a moment. Someone's cup clinked against a saucer. And the staff? He asked. That's your call. Darnell set down his cup. Pull the footage from last night. Document the reservation failure. I want everything in writing before the closing date. And Phil Sutter? I want to know everything about his employment history at that property. Every incident report. Every complaint. Everything. Adaora wrote it down. She didn't ask him what he was going to do with it. She already knew. Here's something Darnell Osei-Kumah had learned over 30 years of doing business. The moment you let anger make your decisions for you is the moment you start losing. He had seen it happen to other people. Smart people. People who had every right to be angry, who had been treated badly, cheated, dismissed, underestimated, and who let that anger collapse inward until it became the thing that defined them. Until they were making decisions not from strategy but from wound. He refused to do that. So for the 9 days between that Tuesday evening and the closing date, Darnell went about his business. He attended a board meeting in Atlanta. He flew to New York for a conference. He called his daughter Zora, who was finishing her second year of law school, and who, when he told her what had happened, got very quiet in the way she'd had since she was 7 years old, which meant she was angry enough to be completely still. Dad, she said, I'm fine. I know you're fine. I'm not asking if you're fine. I'm asking what you're going to do. I'm going to close the deal. And then we'll see. She was quiet. I want to be there, Zora. Dad, I want to be there. He thought about it for a moment. Clear your schedule for the 15th. The closing happened on a Thursday morning at the offices of a Cincinnati law firm. Darnell was there with Adaora and Russell and 2 other members of his team. The sellers were represented by 3 attorneys who were very professional and very eager to get the signatures on the page. The deal had been in the works long enough that everyone in the room just wanted it done. It took 4 hours. At 1:47 in the afternoon, Darnell Osei-Kumah signed the final document, shook hands with the outgoing ownership group, and became the legal owner of the Albrecht Grand Hotel. He thanked everyone in the room. He was gracious. He smiled. Then he walked out into the Cincinnati sunshine, took a breath, and called his daughter. It's done, he said. I'm outside, she said. He turned around. Zora was standing on the sidewalk 20 feet away, in a gray coat, her hair pulled back, looking at him with an expression that broke his heart open in the best possible way. She looked exactly like her mother. He walked over and hugged her for a long time and didn't say anything. Okay, she finally said into his shoulder. Now what? Now, he said, we go to the hotel. They didn't announce themselves. That was important to him. No press, no cameras, no staged entrance. He wasn't interested in spectacle. He had never been interested in spectacle. He and Zora walked in through the front door of the Albrecht Grand at 3:15 in the afternoon. Darnell was wearing a suit, dark navy, well cut, no coffee stains, and carrying the same briefcase he'd had with him 11 days earlier. Christine was at the front desk. She looked up, and for just a moment, a fraction of a second, something crossed her face. Recognition. The kind that comes with a small, cold feeling in the stomach. Then she composed herself. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Albrecht. Do you have a reservation? No, Darnell said pleasantly. I own the hotel. The lobby went very quiet, not all at once. It was more like a sound dropping out, a guest conversation tapering off, a bellhop pausing mid-step, the soft elevator music suddenly feeling very loud in the absence of everything else. Christine stared at him. My name is Darnell Osei-Kumah. I'm the new owner of this property, effective as of this afternoon. He set a document on the counter, a single page, the cover sheet of the purchase agreement. I'd like to see the general manager, please. The general manager's name was Warren Hollis. He was a trim, carefully dressed man in his late 40s who had managed the Albrecht for 6 years, and who, when he received the call from the front desk, came down in the elevator with the particular look of a man who does not yet know how bad things are about to get. He introduced himself. He shook Darnell's hand. He said, "Mr. Osei-Kumah, welcome. We weren't expecting you today." "I know," Darnell said. They went upstairs to the management suite. Zora sat in a chair by the window and said nothing, but she watched everything. Adeora arrived 20 minutes later with the full documentation package. Hollis sat across from them and listened as Adeora walked him through the ownership transfer, the new management structure, and the immediate operational review that would begin the following week. Then Darnell said, "I was here 11 days ago." Hollis went still. "I came in through the front door on a Tuesday evening. I had a reservation under Kumah Capital Hotels, LLC. The front desk was unable to locate it. And then your head of security physically removed me from the property." Warren Hollis had the experience of a man who had handled difficult situations before, but this was not a situation his experience had prepared him for. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "I've reviewed the incident report," Adeora said, setting a folder on the table, or rather, the absence of one. "There's no documented report of the incident from your security team. I wasn't aware. The security footage, however, is quite clear. We've obtained a copy through the discovery process initiated by our office." She opened the folder, set a still image on the table. It was grainy, pulled from a ceiling camera, but it was unambiguous. Hollis looked at it for a long moment. "Phil Sutter," Darnell said. "How long has he been with the property?" Hollis cleared his throat. 11 years. And, in those 11 years, how many incident reports involve complaints from guests about unnecessary force or discriminatory treatment? Silence. "We've reviewed his personnel file," Adeora said. "We count 7, in 11 years. 7 formal complaints, none of which resulted in termination." Hollis looked like a man sitting in a room that was very slowly running out of air. "I want you to understand something," Darnell said. His voice was still calm, still measured. The same voice he'd had in the lobby 11 days ago when he'd stood up off the floor and straightened his jacket. "I'm not here to burn this place down. I'm here because I own it now, and I intend to run it properly." He paused. "Phil Sutter's employment ends today. I want his termination process before close of business. I want it documented, with cause, and I want every detail of what happened on the 11th included in that documentation. And I want it done correctly, by the book, with your HR team present." Hollis nodded. Slow, small nods, like a man agreeing to something inevitable. "Christine at the front desk. I want her performance reviewed. Not terminated. Reviewed. I want to know if what I experienced that evening is a pattern or a one-time failure. That distinction matters." Another nod. "And I want a full staff meeting. Every department. This week. Because this property is under new ownership, and I want the people who work here to understand what that means for how guests are going to be treated from now on. Every guest. In every room. Every time." Phil Sutter got the call at 4:43 in the afternoon. He was in the security office on the lower level, 2 floors beneath the lobby, where he'd grabbed a man by the collar 11 days earlier. He picked up the phone, heard what Warren Hollis had to say, and for a long moment said nothing. Then he said, "Who is he?" Hollis told him. What happened next? What Phil Sutter did in the moment that followed that information was something that the people in that office would talk about for a long time afterward. He sat down in his chair. He put his face in his hands. And he stayed like that for almost a full minute, while the phone sat on the desk in front of him. Warren Hollis's voice still coming faintly through the speaker. It wasn't guilt, exactly. Or maybe it was. It was the specific collapse that comes when you have believed something about yourself. That you are the authority. That your judgment is right. That the rules bend toward you. And then the floor opens up and shows you exactly what you were and what you did and what it cost. He cleaned out his locker without speaking to anyone. He walked through the lobby, through the same lobby, and out the front door. He didn't look at the front desk. He didn't look at the chandeliers. He walked to his car and he sat in it for a long time. The staff meeting happened 2 days later. Every department, housekeeping, food and beverage, security, front desk, maintenance, concierge. 91 people in the ballroom on the second floor, some sitting, some standing along the walls. Darnell stood at the front of the room without a podium, without a prepared speech, without a PowerPoint presentation. Zora was in the back. Adaora was by the door. He said, "I'm not going to pretend the last few years have been easy for this property. I've seen the books. I know about the deferred maintenance. I know about staffing turnover. I know this hotel has been struggling." He paused, looked around the room. "I also know that most of you came to work here because you're good at what you do. And I'm not interested in starting over from scratch with 91 strangers when I've got 91 people in front of me who know this building, know these guests, and know this business." The room was very quiet. The particular quiet of people who are listening hard, because they're not sure yet whether what they're hearing is good news or bad news. What I am interested in is changing one thing. One fundamental thing that has nothing to do with renovations or revenue projections or staffing ratios. He let that sit for a moment. I'm talking about how we treat people who walk through that door. Every person. Regardless of what they're wearing. Regardless of what they look like. Regardless of whether they fit your idea of what a guest here is supposed to look like. He paused again. Because I walked through that door 11 days ago and I was thrown to the ground by a member of this staff. Not a sound in the room. I'm not telling you that to make you feel bad. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what kind of property you've been working in. And because you deserve to know that it's going to be different now. Not because I'm angry. Because this place can be better, and I intend for it to be. He stepped back. Any questions? A woman in the back raised her hand. She was in her 30s, dark uniform, from the housekeeping department. Her name, Darnell would learn later, was Brenda Achterberg. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. "Our jobs. Are we okay?" Darnell looked at her directly. "If you do your job with integrity, you're okay." "Yes." She nodded, sat back down. A man near the window, tall from the maintenance team, said quietly, "I saw it on the camera. What happened to you?" "I'm sorry." Darnell looked at him for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "Just that." There's a thing that happens in stories like this. A moment where we're supposed to land on the lesson like it's a package that was shipped to us and all we have to do is open it. Don't judge a book by its cover. What goes around comes around. Respect costs nothing. And those things are true. But here's what I want you to sit with. Darnell Osei-Kumah didn't become the owner of the Albrecht Grand Hotel because he was thrown to the ground in the lobby. He was already the owner. 9 days away from signing, the disrespect didn't create the consequence. The consequence was already in motion. What changed was something smaller and harder to quantify. When Darnell stood in front of those 91 employees, he wasn't performing justice. He wasn't making a point. He was running a business that he had spent 6 weeks evaluating, that he had traveled to Cincinnati on a Tuesday to walk through with his own eyes, and what he'd seen in the lobby, on the marble floor, in the faces of the people who stood there and said nothing. That was data. It told him everything he needed to know about the work ahead of him. That's what 30 years will teach you, if you let it. That the moments that break you, the ones that put you on the floor, are also information. They're telling you something about where you are and what needs to change. The question is whether you're paying attention. The Albrecht Grand closed for 6 weeks of renovation in January. When it reopened in March, it had new HVAC, repaired elevators, a redesigned lobby, and a training program for all guest-facing staff that was written, in part, by a second-year law student named Zora Osei-Kumah, who had strong opinions about dignity and accountability and put them both in writing. The hotel's occupancy rate for that first quarter was the highest it had been in 4 years. Warren Hollis kept his position as general manager. He turned out to be competent in ways that the previous ownership had never fully used. Darnell believed in not wasting what was already working. Christine's performance review found no pattern of discriminatory behavior, just a failure of attentiveness on a busy evening, compounded by poor judgment. She was put through the new training program. She stayed on. The camera footage of the Tuesday evening was preserved as part of the legal documentation. It was never made public. Darnell did not seek media coverage. He did not want to be a story. He just wanted to run a hotel.
One last thing.
About 3 months after the reopening, a reporter from a Cincinnati business publication tracked down the story, not through Darnell, but through the legal filings. She called Ada Ora, who declined to comment. She called Warren Hollis, who said only that the Albrecht was under new ownership and performing well. She eventually reached Darnell directly by email, asked if he'd be willing to speak about his experience and what it meant. He wrote back a single paragraph. He said, "My father told me every morning before school that I was more than what anyone expected of me. I've been trying to act like it for 53 years. I hope the hotel reflects that. I hope a lot of things do." The reporter published the piece. It was picked up by 2 national outlets. Darnell didn't read either of them. He was in a meeting.